Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Nigel Green, welcome to the podcast.
Kent, nice to meet you.
Yeah, it is good to meet you. We have that mutual friend in Hunter Clark.
That's right.
So
Hunter, hope you're listening, yeah.
Oh, Hunter's definitely listening, for sure. Hello, Hunter. Question for you. My understanding is you used to live in Nashville for some period of time and then moved to the middle of nowhere, moved to a farm, moved to Kentucky. What's going on? What was the reason there, and how's that going?
10 years, lived in Sylvan Park. Wife, 2 kids.
Oh, wow. We go to church right there.
Yeah, we did too. So we went to Cross Point when it had started in Sylvan Park, followed it downtown. Love Sylvan Park, love Nashville.
Yeah.
May 2018, I found myself sitting in traffic just to go to the grocery store on a Saturday, fighting over swings at any community park, and stressed out about things that I should not be stressed out about. And there's this truth that what you work on works on you. I was working on a business in this city, driving down to Brentwood every day, and it was beginning to work on me. And I didn't like the way it was working on me. So my wife's family has farmed southern Kentucky since 1833. So
Dang.
For long
1833 or 1933?
1833.
That's a long time.
So since I've known her, back when we were dating, we would go to the farm. When we were in Nashville, we would spend the weekends on the farm, and then every Sunday night we would drive back into the city, and I liked it less and less. So I said, I think I got it backwards. You know, there people go away for the weekend and then come in during the week, and I said, what if we lived here and came into Nashville when it made sense? And so we tried it for 2 weeks. 8 days into it, we put our house on the market, and we haven't looked back.
Really?
Yeah.
And when did you move? How long have you been doing this?
2 years.
2 years. So you've been doing it long enough to tell if this is a good idea or not.
Best decision we've made for our family.
Really?
Yep.
Now, how far are you from Nashville?
1 hour.
Oh, well, that's not too bad.
No, people drive that every day to get here and come to work.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what's weird about that is there was a stretch last year. We were living in Mount Juliet, working at Franklin. That was a 1 hour and 10-minute commute.
Yeah.
So 1 hour is really not that bad.
Well, people, when I tell them I live in Kentucky, they just assume it's like out
that's
yonder.
what I assume.
Yeah, it's out yonder. But no, I'm just...
How far to the airport?
1 hour.
Okay. Any downsides? I mean, there's got to be some trade-offs, but...
There's no... let's just go get something to eat. There's no, well, let's see what this couple's doing. Maybe they want to come over tonight.
Okay.
There's that.
But
downside.
Do you miss that, though? Or are you fine with that? Because I feel like I'd be pretty fine with that.
Dude, I'm pretty good with it. Like, everyone is like, how are you handling quarantine? I'm like, it's basically just hunting. It's just hunting season for me. I don't see people. I enjoy it. What I find is that while you can't wing it, you have more intentional time with people. So they come and stay longer. You go deeper. There's not as much noise. There's not as much like getting through hanging with people because there's something else to do.
Sure. Access
to healthy food, even though we have seemingly food around us. Nothing that they're growing around us is for human consumption. It's all for ethanol or some other big ag. So when you live in rural America, getting to food is a problem. So we have to come to Nashville if we want to go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. And so we try to think about, if we're going to go to Nashville, let's go to the grocery store.
Okay.
So today, when we're done, I go to Trader Joe's before I go back to the farm.
Okay. Well, I was just about to say you're going to be going to Trader Joe's at kind of a bad time if you're going to the Green Hills one, but traffic's really not bad ever since quarantine. It hasn't come back in full steam yet.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
2.
And what are their ages?
4.5 and a little over 2.
Oh, okay. Congrats. And what are you thinking about school?
Public school.
Okay.
Which is another reason, right? So I sat here and I said, all right, Nigel, let's just roll the tape forward. I know me. If I stayed in town, there's no way I'm resisting the temptation to put them into private school. No way. And I just did the math on that. And the back of the napkin math is another exit of a company for me. And I said, let's just not do it.
It's easy math because you can just take 20 times however many years, basically, or even more. It's crazy.
And it's not a good number.
No, it's not a good number. So you feel good about the public schools up there, so that's what you'll do for school.
My mother-in-law was the principal at the school that my kids will go to.
Oh, wow.
My wife went to school there.
Oh, okay.
Her father went to school there. So there's a lot of legacy.
Yeah. You got some insider advantage then. I'm just intrigued by that whole idea. I mean, we lived in the country before we moved to Nashville. We love Nashville. Don't plan to move an hour out, but have friends that are doing a little bit more of what you're doing as their kids have gotten older. I mean, there seems to be some advantages. For the kids, do you think? Is it by the way, are they boy, girl, or?
My son is 4.5. His name's Foster.
Okay.
And then Maddie Jane is 2.
Okay. Was part of your philosophy there that you wanted your kids to be raised on space, they can run, go explore? Was that part of the thinking?
Yes, and I'm subject to my own biases. I think that I grew up humble in Alabama. I didn't know we were poor, but we were. And I think it's easier for a person to go up socioeconomically and learn, like take the scrappiness and modify it to be more refined. I think it's harder in my experience. And I went to a posh, elite private college, so I've seen it. I've seen that other end of the spectrum. I think it's harder you lose a sense of like, reality. And so I wanted my son to not grow up used to private school. I feel like there's some disadvantages. There are obviously a lot of advantages, but I think that so much of the education is what you do after school, and he's going to get that from us. We're going to force him to read books and do projects and go see the world. And I just felt like if he understood what hard work was and what real people go through, he'll be better in life.
Yeah, so you can build that foundation and then add the technical stuff later. Yeah. I think that's a great way to look at it. There was just someone on here recently, 4 or 5 kids, and all their kids went to public school, and basically they all have PhDs. And there's nothing wrong with public school. No. For sure. How about the farming? I want to get into the book, but one of the things that interested me kind of right off the bat here is the analogy between sales and farming. This I'd never heard of before. This I'd never seen before. Do you have a farming background, or where did this idea come from? I mean, it's actually pretty great. When you start to think about it, there's a lot of great comparisons there.
Out west, they call it gentleman farming or ranching. Here in the South, my father-in-law would probably call it piddling. I'm a piddling farmer. I have no background in it. I can barely drive a tractor, but I own land and I see it every day. So it took me literally leaving an office building and officing right in the midst of agriculture for the parallels between sales and farming to just hit me in the face. Going to church with farmers, seeing them in the community, their identity is the yield. It's what are we going to put away? What's the pricing? And it's the same thing. Like you just see them in small group at church, and they're always doing some kind of like mental model on what they need to do. And I'm like, that's what sales leaders do. They sit around and all they're thinking about is, what are all the ways I can hit this number? Yeah. Because if you don't hit the number, you won't be a sales leader for very long.
It's true.
And if you don't have a harvest, you're just not a farmer. They're just not. There's no faking it in farming. And so it became really clear to me that they're all the same. It's an identity-driven profession.
When was that for you? Recent? Since you moved to Kentucky or prior?
When I moved to Kentucky. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. I'd love to hear a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from, and how you got into sales to begin with.
So I grew up, like I said, humble in Alabama. Alabama is a football state. If you don't play football, people want to know why. I did. I was okay at football, but I'm small. I'm 5'6", 180 pounds. And so
you got a good build, though.
A decent build.
Where'd you play?
I played in Tennessee at the University of the South in Sewanee. Go Tigers. We weren't very great.
Not everyone can be.
We were average. We were typically around 500. But one thing I'll say about playing football at Sewanee is we never really let studies or practice or anything get in the way of our real education, which is hanging out and drinking and having fun and that kind of stuff. So I went to Sewanee, and then after Sewanee moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and was working for 2 Swanee alums that played football, considerably older, but that Swanee network pulled me there, and that was my first job in sales. Did that for a couple of years, moved back to Nashville, got into healthcare, which moves you to Nashville eventually. It's like if you're in healthcare, you'll do a season in Nashville, probably. So I did, and I just stayed.
Okay. Met your wife here?
Met my wife at the Jacksonville airport.
In Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah.
At the airport?
At the airport. We were both flying to Nashville for Christmas. I was going south to Alabama. She was going north to Kentucky. Same flight. Poor girl minding her own business in the airport.
But were you on you weren't on the same plane because you were going the wrong direction?
No, we were both living in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, okay.
And we were both on a flight from Jacksonville to Nashville.
Were you Southwest?
Southwest.
Did you choose to sit by her?
I did.
No way.
Yes.
You were walking down the Southwest aisle on an airplane, saw presumably a pretty girl, and decided to sit by her.
Ken, it's way worse than that. She was sitting in a terminal by herself, reading Into the Wild. There was plenty of empty seats, and I went and sat down right beside her.
Did you leave one chair?
No,
right there?
Right beside her.
Why? Did you just were attracted to her right out of the gate? Or
it was and is a smoke show. So I had why not? There she is, sitting there. She's beautiful. Here's my chance.
What'd you do, or what'd you say?
She was annoyed.
Well, I can imagine. The type of thing probably happened all the time.
So Jacksonville has a large naval population. They have an air station there. I don't have hair, as you can see, because we're sitting together. But if you're listening, so I'm a pretty fit, bald guy. So she had naturally assumed I was in the Navy. So her first question was, "Are you in the Navy?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And then I persisted to annoy her, and she wanted to get back in her book, and she said, "Don't you have a book or something?" Which really set me off because I am a pretty voracious reader. And so I said the B word.
Oh, no.
I said, "Please, come on." And so I reached in my bag and showed her what I was reading. But that to her was like, who is this guy? And then so we hit it off.
You set the hook a little bit. I see what you did there. Yeah. Did
So-
she know out of the gate that you were a sales professional, or weren't you at this point?
No, she didn't know.
Okay. But you were, though.
I
You were
was, yeah.
using some sales tactics?
Yeah.
And then you wound up sitting beside each other
Then
on the plane?
I told her on the plane that she'd be my girlfriend in 30 days. She said, "You're crazy." And then she started texting me over the break. So I hard pressed and back off, right? Create that scarcity and just take it away. Take it away. And then I changed my flight to fly back with her.
Oh, wow.
And the rest is history.
Congratulations.
Yeah. She tried to kiss me on the first date, and I wouldn't do it. I told her I don't kiss on the first date. And then here we are.
There you go. Well, whatever you did worked. Yeah. Were you thinking in your mind, okay, press in, scarcity, following up, or you're just following your gut at this point? You're along for the ride, basically.
I just knew I liked her.
Yeah.
She needed me.
Yeah. How soon after that did you guys get married then?
So 18 months.
Okay. Yeah. Congrats, man.
Yeah, thanks. And we just celebrated 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, March was 10 years.
March of 2020. Ooh, kind of an awkward year to have a 10-year anniversary, but there you go. Yeah. Awkward time, actually. That was like right in the middle of everything, too.
Absolutely.
But I guess if you're in Kentucky in that an hour out, doesn't sound like that would affected you guys too much.
No.
What was the sentiment in the country, with the people out there more in the country? Like, were they more worried about COVID or less worried about COVID?
Not worried at all.
Really?
No. A lot of them think it's a big hoax, which I don't subscribe to. I think there's a level of which speaks to access to education and news, and but a lot of them, no, they're not buying into this at all.
Yeah, let's talk about the book. What is I'm holding it right here. Revenue Harvest: A Sales Leader's Almanac for Planning the Perfect Year. Copyright just a few months ago, right? This is 2020. This thing just came out.
In 2019, yeah. It's just been out not too long ago. Yeah.
When did it launch?
Well, it launched right in the midst of COVID, which I could write a second book on how to not launch a book.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So don't do it during a pandemic that's followed up by race tension and protests.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. Yeah, you had about every distraction possible.
But I think the truth, what the book opens up talking about the reality of planning, that, if you don't have a plan, you're probably not going to be successful. The plan, like I had a book launch plan, the plan itself is useless because things that you didn't anticipate to happen will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the element of planning, the exercise of thinking through sequential steps is indispensable.
Mm-hmm.
So we threw out the plan and said, we got all this media push, but nobody wants to hear about a sales leader's almanac right now. So we're a lot of it's been shelved. But I think we've done the most with what we can do. But yeah, so we launched this book right in the midst of a pandemic. I think it's still very relevant because the whole first part of the book is adversity is going to happen at some highly unprecedented and inconvenient time.
Yes. I don't know a lot about selling books, but my understanding is it's good to sell as many as you can kind of right out of the gate, and that really helps. And of course, I'm assuming that was difficult for you with all of the. Are you going to circle back around after things cool off a little bit with like a launch 2.0 or
no? So I decided to self-publish it.
Okay.
And a lot of what you're speaking to is having that push at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That's really for authors that care about being a bestseller. And I just don't care. It's not why I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in being a best-selling author. Never has been a part of my plan, nor do I care about it. So I chose not to deal with a publisher or any of the gamification that's required to sell a book.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. What would you say is kind of the big idea of this book? And I'm curious, what was the gap in the marketplace that you saw where you thought like this book there's a place for this book. There's a need for this book, because I mean, obviously there's a lot of sales stuff out there.
So that's right. There's a lot of sales stuff out there. You just type in Amazon sales books. There's a lot. Some of it's good, some of it's garbage. But if you want to talk specifically to the leader of a sales team or a CEO or the C-suite or an investor, there's not a lot of really good content for them. So this book is not for a salesperson unless you want to get into sales leadership. This is for someone that has 10, 20, 40, 100 people in a sales organization that reports to them, or an executive that has a sales leader on their team or is responsible for the sales function of their business, or investors who want to understand what are the levers that really drive sales performance year in, year out, good economy, bad economy. It's a crash course.
Okay. And you saw there was less out there on that particular front.
I can name the books on one hand. 3 of them are textbooks written by the same author that teaches at Kellogg, he's in his legacy years. He's going to be retiring. And the other thing, Kent, is that the other books that are out there are written by consultants that never did it. So they're just kind of pulling work out of their consulting practice. And I say that, and I am a consultant now, but for 10 years I led sales teams. So there's an angle of being a practitioner that I think is unique about the book.
Yeah. I always appreciate that. I mean, you don't always get that. Obviously, you don't get that with every book or even many books. But when those two come together, I've always liked that. Adds an extra level of appreciation. I'd love to hear a little bit about your sales, though, experience.
Yeah.
In the last few years leading up to this.
So my sales leadership experience in the last...
Actually, just career, I guess. Not even sales leadership experience.
So I got into sales. I did an internship with Northwestern Mutual, the financial service entity. They have one of the top sales internships in the nation. It's like it's a summer-long program. They teach you how to sell, and I did that, and then quickly got into selling marketing and printing to healthcare companies, and that's when my healthcare career started. So I was in the marketing departments of Medtronic and what is now McKesson every day, and they have huge sales teams. So I got exposed to what it's like to be in B2B sales in healthcare. One of my clients introduced me to Professional Hospital Supply, which is out of Temecula, California, and they hired me, moved me to Nashville, and I led one of their divisions for 3 years. Then they sold that business to Medline, and they didn't need our sales team anymore. So I was kind of looking for what was next for me.
Is that the one we took it from like 94 million to 350
This
million?
is what's coming up.
Okay.
So I got approached by Foundations Recovery Network, which is an addiction treatment provider here in Nashville. They, at the time, 2012, owned a number of addiction treatment centers from California to Michigan, Tennessee, Georgia, kind of all over the country. And they had this thesis that if they could build a real sales team and add that on to their, their direct marketing, most of their patients came from driving phone calls through TV, radio, internet to a call center. But if they had a sales team that called on hospitals and other entities that saw patients that needed help with addiction, that they could really do something special with the business. And that was my background, was being in and around the healthcare system, the providers, the practitioners. And so there was this thesis that they had, could we do it, and would it be a real differentiator? Well, we did it. And so we hired a small team in 2012, didn't hire another rep in 2013, and doubled the business. Then we started proving the model and started hiring and expanding the team. And when we sold the business, we had roughly 40 reps across the country, and we more than tripled the amount of revenue that was coming out of the business.
Dang.
We sold it for 10 times revenue.
Wow. And you were the sales leader of that run? And this was the addiction treatment company?
Yeah.
Now, was the services... So if someone bought that, for example, did they move and go to a house somewhere, or like or was it more scalable, like they got treatment somehow through telemedicine or an app or something like that?
Nowadays, that's how it's delivered. And there are still people that leave and go away, travel for treatment. That's largely what we were selling, was you leave your job, you leave your family, you go away for 30 days. And we had like 12 to 14 what's called residential treatment centers, where you reside there for a 30-day period. And that's what we were selling.
But 12 to 14 treatment centers you can't push through $350 million worth of...
That's the valuation. That's what we sold it for. So that's not the revenue. That's what,
what it was
valued
at.
Yeah.
I see.
So we sold it for 10 times revenue. We were doing somewhere 35, 36 million a year in revenue.
I see. Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
What a run.
Yeah, it was a good run.
Dang.
Yeah, so we sold, the treatment price was roughly anywhere between $28,000, $29,000 and $60,000 a month. And most of it was paid by the insurance company.
$60,000 a month for someone to go to a home for 30 days.
Yeah.
Whoa, not cheap.
No.
Wow. But presumably worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's addictions of all kinds.
Mostly alcohol and illicit drugs.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. So from there, is that when you got into consultancy?
No, there I went and took a post as CEO of StoryBrand.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And love StoryBrand. Still a huge fan of StoryBrand, and we accomplished a lot very quickly. But that actually opened my eyes to what I'm brilliant at. So I only stayed at StoryBrand for 6 months as CEO. And quite frankly, I think Don would say this, it was a battleship captain for a rowboat, I think is the exact term that he used. A lot of firepower. I came in and just built out a lot of stuff that's in the book. We're going to do these things. We're going to do it at this scale. This is how we're going to measure it. This is how we're going to make it repeatable. And then we did that. And then it was time to hand it back over to Don. And then Don needed to be the CEO again. But what he really just needed was someone to come in for a short period and say, help me figure out, this thing is growing faster than I ever thought. And I don't know how to make it predictable. I don't know how to forecast. And I don't know what levers to manipulate to get the most out of this moment. At the time, he had just been on the Dave Ramsey show.
Oh, okay.
And so he was just really riding some momentum from being on that show. And we had this unattributable lift. We knew that there was this buzz around entree leadership and Dave Ramsey, but we didn't know how to measure it. So then that led us down this path of like, how can we predictably month in and month out scale this thing? So we did that. And kudos to them. They're going to do tens of millions of dollars in sales this year.
Great. Good for them. Is that when their deal kind of took off after they had the StoryBrand book and that whole system?
Yeah.
Is that when things kind of took off for Don? Because he's written books before that, but
he was a memoir author. And then building a story brand was his first business book, and he's since then put out a couple more. And their whole offering has shifted a little bit to where now you can certify your entire agency in the story brand model. You can be a story brand guide, a consultant, and go teach the framework. And it's really brilliant what they've done.
Mm-hmm. Then is that when you got into consultancy then after that?
Yeah, I got into consultancy and if you're a consultant and you're listening to this, don't do what I'm about to tell you that I did. I was on the board of advisors and still am on the board of advisors for a company called Relode. They're here in Nashville, and they created a marketplace for doctors, nurses, and advanced practitioners to refer themselves or their friends to jobs and eliminate recruiters. So I'd been working with the CEO for a couple of years now on the board of advisors, and he said, well, now that you're a consultant, how can we buy all of your time?
But it sounds probably pretty tempting to a consultant who's looking for work, right?
It sounds really cool. It feels really safe. It feels really secure. All your billable hours for the next year is taken care of. You have a job when you do that. And I had a job. And I didn't do it well because I saw it as a client, and he saw me as an employee a lot of times. And so it created a lot of we're still very good friends, still very active in the business, but was not. So did it for a year. And that's really, Kent, when I said this isn't working for me. What I saw was me driving from Sylvan Park down to Maryland Farm, sitting an hour in traffic every day. I said, "What am I doing? I don't even like this." I kind of had to come apart, and I said, "I'm just not doing this anymore." I told Matt, "I can't. I'm going to die. This feels like a prison. I can't do this. I'm out. I'm going to go back to being an advisor, and let's hire somebody else."
What would you suggest that consultants do? Never have only one customer. Never have anyone that's more than 30% of your business or 50%? Because you said you would advise consultants not to go out and find one customer that pays them for their entire time, basically.
I don't think it's a good business model to have your entire revenue come from one client.
Sure.
There are a lot of risks associated with that.
Yeah.
So I think that it's great for if you have to do it, if you have to be scrappy for a season, it's okay. It will end badly for them and for you. So as quickly as you possibly can, diversify your client portfolio, the more durable you are as a consultant. Yeah. Because there's always I think especially I'm a company of one person. Okay. So when you think about consulting, there's this scalability model where you bring in other practitioners that apprentice under you and you build them and there's a markup. I don't want that. I mean, I've managed big teams. It's not where I am right now with having 2 young children. So I'm not very scalable. So I have to think through what ways I can manipulate scale. And one of them is just having a diversification within my pipeline so that I'm not on this balancing act of go get work, do work, go get work, do work. So it allows for me to have a little space to market me and not always be bogged down in deliverability. Because there's the thing about good consultants is they always leave. They have to. If a consultant doesn't leave, how are you measuring the impact that they're providing for the business? They've got to go at some point. There has to be an end of the consulting agreement where you teach them what you came to teach them.
Right, that's the whole point.
Can do it. Yeah. So
otherwise, you're an employee. It makes total sense.
Yeah. So you have to know that there's an exit, and you need to be creating your exit strategy, and you have to have enough space to go and find that next opportunity so that you can end when it's time to end.
Right. So what's interesting about that then is you sort of always need to be looking for the next customer then, right? Because otherwise...
I'm the sales development rep. I'm the account executive. I'm customer success. I mean, I'm digital I'm everything for my business.
Do you enjoy it, or do you miss being part of a team and leading a sales team yourself?
So I do enjoy it. And I miss that, but I miss being a part of the team. But the way I position myself is this: I come alongside the executive team. So most of my clients, I'm a stakeholder, shareholder. So I have a longer term engagement. So I feel like I'm a part of the team.
Oh, interesting.
But then I have clear boundaries. It's like, this is not a job. I am not an employee. I'm doing these things in exchange for compensation of this type, and that's it. Like, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so if you get a new agreement contract with a new company, are you asking for some equity, or it just depends? Because it sounds like you said a lot of the companies that you work for, you do have some shares in that company. Mm-hmm. Is that generally just part of your ask, or do you happen to own some of these companies anyway, and then you provide the consultancy?
It always starts out as knowing. Like we typically, it's kind of like dating, right? You don't ask to get married on the first date, and I think becoming a shareholder is marriage. I mean, you're financially wed to one another. We try it out for a while, and then it becomes. There's always like this inflection point where they want more time of me, and it also allows for me to see if I think the business really have leg. Is there something special about this? So for 3 or 4 months, we just work like in a dating relationship, and then we sit down during our first kind of review or second review, and it becomes like, well, what do you want to do next? And they typically ask me, they want my opinion. Well, do we have something here? And if they do, I say, yeah, and here's what I would do, and then I come alongside as always a very minority shareholder.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So now it doesn't sound like you're traveling every day, certainly. So is most of your work then, your daily work, is it over video or phone or how? Oh, okay.
One thing that's becoming more prevalent in the sales world that I think needs to happen, and I'm glad that this pandemic to some degree has catalyzed this shift. So early stage, when I say early stage, proof of concept, an established customer, I'm not talking about startup, I'm talking about scaling companies. Understand that you especially in marketing, that you can't get everything out of one person. Mm-hmm. So it's common practice to just go hire consultants that know SEO, know PPC, and even within the paid media, they know Facebook, they know Instagram, they know these different channels well. But they'll hire them for projects, and then they go. But on the sales side, they've always felt like they got to go hire a VP of sales, or you got to own. And so the whole model is broken because they go and hire a sales leader, and they both the sales leader is guilty of this too. So the executive and the sales leader think this is going to be a marriage. This is going to be a long-term thing. One of the two outgrows the other in about 9 to 18 months. The competency of the leader is too much firepower for what the business can scale, and they can't pay them enough to keep them. So they're taking a risk that we'll hire this person and the business will catch up and then pay for themselves. And it doesn't happen. Or the business shifts or outpaces the competencies of the leader and they can't keep up. So but one of those two things happen, and it ends up ending badly. And I think there needs to be more of an approach similar to what our friends in marketing do, which is go into the relationship seeing it as a project base. So what I'm able to do for my clients is they get real chief sales officer firepower for one day. And that's all they need. Because the business can't implement at the rate that I'm able to ideate and task them. So there's some lag. But if I'm there the whole week, it's too expensive of a resource, and I'm not going to do the work. So if I do the work, you're paying a multiple on it versus just paying someone else that can come in and do it. So I do a lot of strategy and assigning and then building the team that does it.
I see. That is fascinating. You're totally right about how marketing it's become acceptable, normal. It's very standard practice to have these subject matter experts and contract them. And then you touched on it, but I imagine most business leaders listening to this can resonate with this idea of it's so tempting. You have someone in mind, you can't quite pay for them now, but man, he or she could really make a difference here. Let's figure out a way to get them on board, because if they can do X and such, then it's all going to work out and it'll be fine. I feel like that happens maybe more often than the business outgrowing the leader, although I maybe it's 50-50. I don't know. I just feel like that plays out quite a lot.
It all the time.
And then you're coming in. Now, are you saying you're not necessarily saying don't hire a sales leader?
No, I'm saying
You're
all
saying-
of my clients have a sales leader in place.
Okay. But don't hire someone to lead them if you can come in and plug in for a period of time.
Most of the companies hire a sales leader to come in and figure out what the model needs to be.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's cart before the horse.
I see.
You need to rent someone to help you figure out the model.
Mm-hmm.
Then when there's traction, hire a sales leader that's done that before. And that's typically what we do. And then I stay alongside for a while as an extra set of eyes and ears.
That's key. That's great insight, man. Maybe it's just us, but I feel like this is easy. This is an easy way to go wrong with what you're just saying there.
It is.
What types of businesses do you work with now?
Almost 100% exclusively healthcare disruptors. So they have a piece of technology or a model that is somehow cutting out some medium, some middle person. So they're disintermediating the way things have been done. That's where I have a lot of value.
Okay. Interesting. So all right. So that's going to cut out a lot of people obviously listen to the podcast. You're really focused on healthcare disruption.
So yes, but what I do for a lot of companies, so those of you that just turn this thing off, don't go anywhere yet.
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole offering called a sales team review that is agnostic to industry. I get brought in for the day. There's a lot of prep work that goes into it, but I come in for the day with the sales team and we go through the 7 principles of the book. And what they leave with is a clear path forward. They've got a revenue forecast and an expense model that supports it. They've got clear roles and responsibilities. They know exactly how they're going to assign that revenue to the customers they have or the customers that they need to have in order to hit the revenue mark 12 months down the road. We plan for adversity. We set up all their dashboards and reporting. It's an overhaul of the system. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling widgets or a really sophisticated offering. As a matter of fact, I was in Murfreesboro last week working with a company that manufactures portable sinks. This has nothing really to do with healthcare.
Fascinating.
But a lot of my retained work, they hire me because I've been in healthcare for 10 years. So I have the relationships. And that's a lot of times why they're willing to give me equity in the business is because I can make introductions that can really move the business forward.
Right.
As one of my clients says, you turn decades into days.
Dude, that's a good compliment, man. That's a big compliment, particularly in the tech space or the disruption space, because you have to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So the 1 day thing, though, you do provide that for businesses outside of healthcare?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. If someone's listening is like, man, that could actually be helpful for me, where would they go to get more information on that?
NigelGreen.co.
Okay. NIGEL.
Green. And then green, just like the color, .co. You can't miss it. It's on my site. It's called a sales team review.
Okay.
Just click on the application and you'll know if you're a good fit for it or not. I ask a series of questions.
Great.
Usually I can get it booked within 3 to 12 weeks.
Okay, fantastic. All right, let's jump into the book. But first, I am curious, what is it about sales that resonates with you? What do you enjoy about it? What do you love about it? Why sales versus other types of management or marketing or whatever? What is it about sales that you love?
It's evergreen. Like there's always, if you can sell, you've always got something to do. And I think that in good economies and bad economies, I mean, you got the Tony Robbins book up there. Look, when we're in a recession, there are people making gobs and gobs of money in this recession. And that's what I love about sales is if you can be an opportunistic individual and you can see where the market's moving, you are basically recession proof. If you have the insight and the courage to move, I think that, there's never been a better time to be a salesperson. Yeah.
I assume also, kind of goes without saying, but I'm assuming that really fits your personality. If you saw a pretty lady and walked up her and sat beside her in an airport and she was reading a book and you wouldn't let her alone, I'm assuming that the sales does fit your personality pretty well.
It does.
Is that how you find the best salespeople? are just born, or can they be made?
They're all made. Every one of them are made. There's no. I love this is a bourbon conversation probably.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is born with what it takes to be a perennial seller.
Yeah.
You may be born with some of the innateness, but a lot of it has to be learned. So let me give you an idea. You may be really good at process, but you have to learn how to stand in front of a room and be comfortable. So you may need Toastmasters. Okay. Well, you may be really good at just going in and commanding a room, but you don't know how to operate in a system. And so you need some formal type of time management or methodology, to some framework, if you will, to rein you in a little bit. So I don't know that you're just born with it.
I would agree with all of that. But you would agree that some people are born with a personality, talents that's going to serve them better in sales and operations, and other people are born with certain personalities, talents, etc., that may serve them better in operations and not sales. Okay.
Well, as a matter of fact, so my friend Jeremy Donovan wrote a book called Leading Sales Development. In that book, he researched Salesforce.com's hiring, all their hiring data for the last decade. I think there was something like 5,000 or 7,000 sellers, that the data that they pulled. And there's some fidelity to this, that the best sellers have a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics education.
Best salespeople?
Best salespeople have a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics background.
That's fascinating.
The reason why many of them don't go into sales is because right out of school, that specific type of education can command a higher salary, entry-level salary, than what entry-level sales does. If you can get that person and they played a college sport, more specifically an individual sport, rowing, golf, tennis, something like a multiple of a chance of being more successful in a sales role.
Really?
And it's really challenged me because I've always loved college athletes, and I've always felt like there's something about team sports. So for the data to say actually individual performers, individual sport athletes do better than team, I'm a little bit sore about that.
But I can kind of see it, though. I can kind of see that. The one that's probably the more surprising to me is having that background in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. I mean, I guess I wouldn't. That's the first time I've heard that.
Well, think about how sales has changed. So, like when you and I were getting started into it, it was all about like get in front of someone, cold call. Nobody does that anymore. Every sales rep now, regardless of what you're selling, has a tech stack that's 4, 5, 7 applications deep. There's so much more data that drives what you're going to do today versus 40 dials, 5 appointments. No. It's like, what time do they open their email? What's the best time to do that?
Yeah, that's
it's
a good
far
point.
more scientific.
Yeah. Interesting. 7 principles for sales leaders. I'd love to have you talk through them.
Okay, so every farmer approaches the growing year and says, regardless of what they're growing, how many harvest seasons they have. So the guy in Wisconsin that's just growing corn, down to the guy in Louisiana that's growing a small garden that's going to be able to get 3 or 4 harvests out of it, knows that the first thing they have to do is plan the year. What's my acreage? How do I assign every tillable acre to a certain plot? What's the pricing? There's this whole science behind what are my inputs, what are the expected outputs, and oh, by the way, it might be too hot, too cold, too much rain, not enough rain. What are my contingency plans? Planning. The second thing they'd have to do is position. It's not enough to have a good plan if your team doesn't understand what the end goal is, how we're going to get there, why it's important. It won't matter. So in the position chapter, we talk about mission, vision, then plan. It's not enough to just go put a plan in front of your people and say, we're doing 20 million this year. No. What's the bigger cause? What's at stake if we don't? What's in it for me? Now show me the plan.
And do you feel like that one, the position one, do you feel like that one gets overlooked a lot?
It's fluff. It gets ignored.
Okay.
It's
we're going to have revenue goals, get after it. And if people don't really understand why, they're going to do some work, but you don't really have their heart, and that's just going to end poorly.
So it's like this, right? You want to lose weight. if you don't have some compelling reason to lose weight, going and stepping on the scale every day or going to the gym and tracking your calories, what's the freaking point, man?
Yeah, it's a great
Why
analogy.
are you doing this?
Yeah.
What's in it for you?
Yeah.
So that's why I think you can't tell, a trainer can't go tell his trainee that we're going to the gym, we're doing these things, I need to measure your chest every third day. Like, none of that matters if you can't anchor it into, okay, how is your life better as a result of going through all this hell?
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's
positioning covers that. Yeah. Okay.
And then prepare. So oftentimes, especially now, everybody's having to write a new plan, reposition the team, but then that requires some skilling. So training, developing your people, preparing also looks like getting the right people that you need. Sometimes doubling the size of the business requires significant investments in technology and new people, different types of people. So we cover that in the prepare chapter. And then plant, which is where everybody really wants to get to, is putting seeds in the ground.
Yeah.
And, the thing that I say about planting that I think is different, this is an executive's take on planting. So it's not to say, well, I got a team and they should be prospecting. It says, hey, buddy, everybody prospects, including you. So what role are you going to play in prospecting? And then before we get to the harvest, everyone thinks that you just put seeds in the ground, you plant, and then there's a harvest. Well, there's this whole step in between called tending, which is making sure that the seeds you put in the ground don't get compacted, get enough water, get enough sunlight. So the harvest, everybody expects a harvest, but nobody wants to do the work of tending to it.
Yeah, that is a big point. And there's a lot of work in the farming analogy. There's a lot, if you think about it, man, there is so much time and work put into that tending process. I mean, it's planting is, you run through the field one time and it's planted. Harvesting, same thing, but tending is week after week. Did a lot of tending for my mom in our big old garden when I was a kid and hated it. Yeah. But it was necessary work.
So that you tend, so that you get the harvest. Then the harvest is a pretty straightforward principle. One of the things that I like about what I talk about in the book is this harvesting with dignity. And it really is meant for the seller. It's probably one of the few segments of the book that the seller can get something out of. Because I'm in healthcare, I get exposed to a lot of different types of healthcare language and practice. There's this whole concept in healthcare called motivational interviewing, and it's what clinicians use to get a patient to change their behavior. So if you have a diabetic patient, you can manage their insulin, but if you don't get them to change what they put in their body, they're going to die. You can tell an addict all the reasons why she should stop putting a needle in her arm, but until you can find one reason why she would, it doesn't matter. So what clinicians are really good at doing in motivational interviewing is finding that the premise is that any reason that you already have to do something is so much stronger than any reason that I could give you. So what I do is we walk through 7 to 8 different types of responses to let you know that you're actually not listening to the customer, that you're actually more asserting your own agenda versus trying to find some reason why they would want to work with you. So it's really tactical about listening and finding a way to harvest that makes the customer feel really good about working with you.
Yes. Yeah, I noticed that. And I'd like to touch on some of those responses too. So we're at harvest. I was going to ask you about, well, you mentioned that it sounds like this highly researched scientific interview process or something that helps people kind of come to their own conclusions or discover their own motivations and feel like it was their own idea.
Yeah. Motivational interviewing.
Oh, okay. How what is this and how long has that been going on?
It's been going on. I mean, it's like I said, clinicians use it every day, and it's go ahead.
It's a way of like asking somewhat leading questions, or what does this look like in real life?
So let me give you a real life example. So I listened back when I was at Foundations Recovery Network, and we're selling addiction treatment. I listened to calls, people calling in. Nobody calls in and says, "I have a drinking problem." They say, "I'm calling because my wife's going to leave me. I'm calling because I failed a drug test and I'm going to lose my job. I'm calling because I'm spending so much money on this that I can't even pay my bills. So they have my wife's going to leave me problem, I'm going to lose my job problem, or I'm going to lose my house problem. So if we were to say, hey, man, you're an alcoholic. No. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because this one time I had too much to drink and I showed up to work. So we have to start with what they're willing to accept.
I see, yeah.
And so the way that translates to the sales world is so many times we see in the customer what our problem, what the problem solve is, how we solve that problem. We don't do a good enough job of meeting them where they are and saying, oh, you have this problem. Well, what if I could help you solve that problem? We try to get them all the way down the spectrum, but we got to start with where they are.
That makes sense. Total sense. And then the last one was restore, which was an interesting one.
Nobody wants that. Nobody has time.
I was just going to say, nobody got time for that.
No, nobody got time for that. That's why you see so many folks in sport that burn out.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you see so many executives with bad behavior. Look, when you live a lifestyle that is different, and for a lot of the folks that I work with, there's a certain level of celebrity within their industry. Everyone knows that they're an executive of a company. They're a private equity investor. I mean, most of them command a lot of money. You can't just go get that job. You can't just go be a CEO. And it's really hard to go be a sales leader for one of these big companies. You have to put in your dues. Mm-hmm. So there's celebrity in the industry. There's celebrity within your company. People know who you are on the org chart. They cater to you. And you get a lifestyle that's not normal. Planes, dinners, expense budget. That will wear on you if you don't check in on your people and check in on yourself from time to time. It's real easy to let things slide. Your own health, your own principles, if you don't take care of yourself. And the whole restore thing is about, look, you're building a career. It's not just one harvest season. You're not a sales leader if you just hit your number 1 year and you fall on your face the next year because you're so daggum tired.
Yeah.
You got to find some time to go back and re-energize yourself and do an inventory and say, hey, how am I doing? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. You're totally right about that. How do you recommend, or how do you see the successful people doing this well? Does it look like, a vacation a couple of times a year, or does it look like, in your slow season, you're still working, but, really don't work more than you kind of need to in a slow season, whenever that might be? Like, is it both and? How do you kind of recommend or see the people that do this restore thing well? What are they doing?
They do two things well. They identify the slow season, so they know when the harvests are, and it could be you may harvest every month. Just depending on your revenue cycles, you may have sell big contracts that close at a certain time every year. You got to know, like, kind of when in your business when those natural rhythms are. The people that do this well don't manufacture work. So when it's slow, and they plan their life around it being slow. They tell their team, I'm not going to be here. They don't just sit there at their desk and come up with stuff to do.
Sure.
For the sake of filling that void.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think leaders do really well, and I talk about this, is they fire themselves. I mean, if you've been a sales leader for any period of time, you're going to get fired. It's kind of like being a coach in the highest ranks of sport. The average tenure for a professional coach is like 1.8 years. I think the last time I did the research.
Is that NFL?
It's all sport.
Oh,
like Major League
Soccer,
Soccer,
wow.
Premier League, NBA. It's like 1.8 years.
I remember seeing those stats. It was surprising to me. Even the stats on, well, I want to say you had some sales leader stats in there too.
It's 3 years.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay,
so short.
It's so short. So what ends up happening is we do the same thing over again. We run the same play, and I think a positive example of that is Pete Carroll's a great coach. It didn't work with the Jets. It just didn't work. It worked at USC. Bill Belichick, great coach. Didn't work in Cleveland. Didn't work. So I think what good sales leaders need to do is, in the same way we tell our salespeople, no is not to you, it's to the offering. Like, you're going to fail. And there's so many things that go into failure. And sometimes failure is not knowing when it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And so I think this principle of firing yourself every year will probably reduce the number of times you get fired by a company.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to say, okay, that same level of excitement and energy that I had when I started, when I was working all night learning about the product, and I mean, I didn't care to be up till 2 a.m. I don't have that anymore. So let's listen to that.
Yeah.
Is that going to be required? If it is, am I the right person? And if, asking yourself, this is a new year, this is a new target, it's a new team and a new economy. Am I the head coach for this?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I need to go join a new team?
Yeah, that really stood out to me too, because you expounded on that a little bit later on in this book, this idea of firing yourself. And I really love that. I love that idea, actually, if for no other reason than to take the opportunity every harvest season or every year, whatever kind of cadence makes sense, I guess. But just exactly what you said, just to ask yourself, like, man, am I still the best man or woman for this position? I so respect people that actually think about that, as opposed to, well, I wonder if I can get another couple of years here if they don't pay attention to me, But when you say fire yourself, are you actually saying they do fire themselves, or they go through the process? Like, they might put out a job application, look at 30 resumes, and decide, no, they're still the best one for this job.
Most people choose to hire themselves back, okay? But hiring themselves back takes, to your point, interviewing for other jobs. I think everybody needs to interview at least once a year, and you should let your people interview once a year. I think you have to make a decision that if you're the right person, then can we agree that the job description needs to change this year from last year? So it's being proactive and rewriting your job description and not letting it get stale. It requires you to be proactive in the way in which you go back to your own vision, your own positioning, and say, why am I going to do it for another year? When you renew that sense of commitment, you tend to last longer. And so that's really what this is about. It's not to exacerbate the reality that you're going to be gone in 3 years. It's to say, can we extend that by having some self-awareness and firing ourselves every year?
Yeah.
So that we don't get fired every 3 years.
Right. I really love that. When did this shift? I mean, it strikes me as, I don't know, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe, people did stick with a job over a longer period of time. But man, that's really changed, of course. When did you see this shifting at a noticeable level?
I don't know that there was a moment. I think I wish I could be more mindful of a moment, but I just accept it as a reality now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a reality.
It really is. And it was different 30 years ago, and I think, man, I don't have experience with the type of sales leadership that you're involved with at that level, but it seems to me a lot of people still have that mentality, even outside sales, where, they're getting a job and you don't tell them it's for life or 20 years, but they sort of feel that way. I think a lot of people still feel that way.
I still hear it in interviews. I'm just looking for a good company where I can establish my roots. And I'm like, no.
You hear that all the time.
This is not what I'm looking for, though.
It's almost like the leftover, I don't know, The Office, the show on Netflix or whatever, or even Parks and Rec, like you see in those TV shows. Like, those people are just there for that job, man, and they want to ride that as long as they can. And it's just that whole world's basically over.
Yeah.
Like, if you're looking at watching those shows thinking, yeah, I'm going to go find something like that to ride something out, outside of the government, that's not how this works anymore.
Well, I think for your audience, you got to run from that. You need business partners at every level, not employees. You need people that care about the outcome, that are willing to take and burden some of the risk, or your business isn't going to make it because you're like the government. You become like the government.
Yeah, for sure. But it's tempting, though, because even the leader who's hiring, like, there's something that feels good about, I'm going to get the right people and we're going to do this together and go shoulder to shoulder for a long period of time. And even as the person doing the hiring, there's a part of the human nature. It's like, let's just get this settled and we'll go through whatever comes our way together. But it's not the way it works anymore.
It's not the reality, no. Well, and so there's, and I think it's fair to say it's no one's fault. Okay. Group health insurance is less attractive. Nobody's matching in 401k. A lot of companies aren't even offering it anymore. The whole world is moving to, like, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're kind of an intrapreneur. And I think those that survive are the ones that treat themselves as me incorporated, and they're in the business of themselves.
Yeah.
And their employer is their current client.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess it's sort of obvious, but just to say it, the one exception to that would be if you're an hourly employee in a manufacturing facility or something like that. I'm sure they love to have you stay as long as possible. And a lot of those people do stay. I mean, they're punching the clock, time in, time out. They got their gig. They love it. They want to stay there for as long as they can. I mean, that still exists.
It still exists. And a lot of them are driving Uber or Uber Eats, or they got a side hustle. So, like, they're not insulated or removed from this gig economy, which goes back to me incorporated. This is my day job. This is my side hustle.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, you had a note in here. It's this idea. It's under plant, I believe, where you would have people assigned to basically collecting leads and then other people assigned to closing the sale. I might be butchering that just a little bit. Can you talk through that? Because that was a new idea for me.
There's this antiquated model. I think it's largely eliminated in the enterprise sales structure now, but it probably still exists in the small to medium-sized businesses where we're going to go hire a salesperson and they're going to be responsible for identifying potential customers, nurturing the relationship, closing the deal, and then ensuring that we don't churn through those customers, that we create lifetime customers. That's a flawed model. It's what we now know, and there's data to prove it, that you need to have a clearly defined sales process that starts from what is the mechanism that we use, or mechanisms, to take potential prospects from being unaware to aware. How do we make them go from aware to interested to evaluating to utilizing, and utilizing to post-purchase, like keeping them? That's a defined sales process that every business should have, and they should know what are kind of like the indicators to show that someone's moved or matriculated lower in their funnel. The skill set for prospecting is very different than keeping a customer happy. And having one person be a generalist and do all of that is asking them to not do anything very well. So companies are now creating specialization. They're largely cutting their sales funnel into thirds. Top of the funnel, new leads, new opportunities. Middle of the funnel, close. Bottom of the funnel, retain. Because it's far easier to keep a customer, sell them something else, than it is to go get a new one. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't go get new customers. You have to go get a certain number of new customers, keep customers, sell them something else, close at a certain rate to really create predictable scale.
And I think later on in the book, you mentioned that you would recommend when a sales team gets to about 10, was it, give or take? Is that sort of a metric that you'd have in mind?
Yeah, 10 to 12, it's time to start specializing.
Okay, interesting. So if you're small and starting out and you have 3 salespeople, probably can't do it, but as your team grows, specialize.
I think so. And I think what I would say to that small business owner that's got 3 reps, there might be a chance for you to specialize. I don't know that you can cut your funnel into thirds, but maybe you can specialize by type of customer. Hey, Johnny, you go work on hospital companies. You go work on manufacturer salaries.
Right.
So, but I think the point, if you're listening, is think of ways in which you can create distinction based on the natural abilities of the people on your team.
Yes.
Let them just go do that.
Yes, I totally agree, man. I love that. I'm glad you called that out in this book. I think that's very helpful. Under hiring here, this is under prepare and then hiring salespeople. I am curious. Of course, you have 6 steps here: resume review, human resource interview, written assessment, video conference interview, personality test, and then actually having them present a business plan and pitching it, which I thought was really great. Where do you see some of the most common mistakes that people are making when they're hiring salespeople?
The most common mistake is not creating a process that accounts for your own biases. So everyone has a bias, okay? I said it, I gave mine away earlier. I love ex-athletes.
Mm.
So I tend to push away folks that didn't play a sport. And there's a lot of really good talent that didn't do that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so the answer is you've got to come up with a process that accounts for your own bias and people on that team in that interview process that can serve as your guardrails to say, I think you might want to reconsider this.
Yeah.
And that's what I think this process does a good job of inviting other stakeholders into the interview process, human resource, the executive team, so that we're not hiring in a vacuum and
I think
just
that's so
hiring the
important.
same person over and over
I
again.
agree. That stuck out to me too. How about when you look at like the people that just have a better track record with hiring salespeople? Like, what are some of the common denominators you're seeing the successful people doing? Does anything come to mind?
They don't skip steps. Okay, so that doesn't mean you can't hire quickly. All that means is that you compress the time that lapses in between steps. Where companies get it wrong is when they say, "Oh, we really like Joe. We don't need Joe to do a personality test."
Right.
You know what? Everybody loves him. Let's just get him on board.
And we laugh, but this is easy to do that. This is a common
So
mistake.
easy.
Yeah.
So those that hire well, and no one has like a flawless hiring record. I could name you probably 10, 15 folks I would never hire again, and it was on me. They didn't do anything wrong. I just made a bad hire. But if you don't skip a step, you have a really good chance of getting it right. Because 6 steps is a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's a lot of steps. Like I said, you can do it fast, but it's a lot of steps.
Yeah. 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 I think that's extremely wise. All right, let's talk about some of those responses that we were talking through earlier: telling, scaring, consulting, tricking, combating, stroking, counseling, distracting. Whatever stands out. You don't need to talk through them one by one, but can you give us kind of the big idea here?
Well, the idea is that when we're trying to, these are all closing situations, right? So this is out of the harvest principle. When we are doing that discovery process, or when we're sitting down with a customer, inevitably we're going to ask a question, or they're going to give us information. What we choose to do with that information really signals whether we heard them or we have our own agenda. So all of those, there are 7 different signs there. And we all tend to do one or a couple of them. But the whole point of this exercise is for you to be really thoughtful about common objections or common problems that your customers have, and check your own agenda at the door. So there's this misconception, Kent, that if I'm being quiet and you're talking, that I'm listening. I could be planning what I'm going to say next.
Well, a lot of people are.
But what I really want to do is to listen empathetically, try to put myself in your shoes and see, why is this a problem? And just because you give me a surface level characterization or a little bit of an insight into what the problem is, if I just stop there and go into my pitch, I'm not digging deep enough. And so what we're trying to do is get sellers to become an extension of their business, help them solve business problems, not just exchange your service for a fee.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I heard a quote in the last half a year. I can't remember where it was, but it's the idea that there's 2 kinds of people: those who listen and those who wait to talk. And this portion here is saying you need to listen. Don't just wait to talk.
If you do this well, what you'll find is that you don't have to pitch. So you'll find that your question to statement ratio changes dramatically when you're in front of the customer. And that all you're doing, instead of spitting out features and benefits or why they would buy your product or why they would work with you, you just find yourself asking another question.
Mm-hmm.
And when you keep asking questions, you become a sense-making device for that customer. And your product is always the answer when it really is making a good product fit to the customer.
Yes.
They just say, yeah, that makes sense. If you could do, yeah, I would, yeah. And what would happen if this became true? And what would it look like if? So you're helping them lay stones across the river to get across to the other side.
Yeah.
You don't have to sell.
Yeah. You talk about the restorative power of reading in here. And well, you mentioned earlier when you met your wife in the airport that you had a book and you read a lot. What are some of your favorite books?
So some of my favorite books, Principles, Ray Dalio.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's an all-time favorite. Good to Great is one of my favorite
Yeah.
books. I have actually I give it away 50 books that I think every sales leader has to read. You can get it for free. Just go to my site and I send it to you. I'm in the phase of my career where I am rereading things. So I have probably 50 or 100 books that I'm just cycling back through.
Oh wow.
Anything that Ryan Holiday writes, I read.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The only one I've read from him is what was the one about the obstacle is the way? Maybe that's what it's titled. The obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the first of a 3-part series. So he did The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, and his most recent one is Stillness is Key.
What is it about Ryan Holiday? Is it about Ryan Holiday or the subject matter that you find so helpful?
Subject matter. Yeah.
Okay.
And
what is it?
I mean, he writes on Stoic philosophy and recognizing what you can and can't control, and a lot of that just tends to really resonate with me.
Do you find that it resonates with you personally, or it's helpful in the sales game?
Both. I mean, I probably read it because I feel like I get a lot out of it. I happen to be in the sales game, so if you're listening to that, you probably would get a lot out of it too.
Yeah.
But I think it's really more for competitors, and I think that is anybody that has a competitive bone in their body, which is why Ryan gets called in by Nick Saban and Bill Belichick and every other team that's anybody. They have Ryan come in and talk about what he does. But I've actually recently I've been challenged by some of my clients to start sharing my notes and what I've been reading. So for the past decade, Ken, I've read 5 to 6 books on leadership and sales and marketing a month. I mean, just plowing through books. What I'm doing now is going back, rereading them, and sharing my notes. So literally, what did I underline? What did I write in the margin? And it's a pretty laborious process.
Right.
But I get a lot out of it.
I'm sure.
And I think it's providing a lot of value. So last month, so it's called Required Reading, and I share those notes to a private email list. It's about 2,000 people that get the email now. You can subscribe for free, but it was 48-page PDF of like 4 books that I said, here's my notes, here's why I think it's still relevant, go have it. And so
the one PDF covers 4 books?
4 books.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep. When do you read?
In the morning, at lunch. I don't really read at night anymore. I used to read a lot at night, but I'm usually pretty smoked at night.
Yeah. I don't read a ton at night anymore either. And do you read like every word, or do you speed read somehow?
I am not a speed reader.
Okay.
I read every word, and it's like
I do too. I can't do it any other way, man.
Finger under I'm like super slow. The cat. I'm not a speed reader.
Dang. So you're reading that slow, still reading 5 or 6 books a month? That's a lot.
I read a
That's
couple
impressive.
hours a day. Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to splash a bourbon before you go?
Sure.
What would you say for a 10-year-old? What's your sales advice for a 10-year-old for Lincoln here? If you were consulting a 10-year-old, teaching them about sales, where would you start?
The world is full of problems. People buy solutions to problems because of how that outcome makes them feel. Okay? Right? So I never buy, I don't pay someone to cut my yard because I need the yard cut. A man that has a nicely cut yard, there's something about his identity to that. You with me? So people buy things because of how it makes them feel.
Yeah.
If you can understand how to solve problems for people in a way that makes them feel good about themselves, you've added to their identity, you will never starve. You will never go hungry. You will never lack a sense of self-worth, purpose, fulfillment, contribution, variety, all of those needs that we all have as humans. If you can do that, you will be valuable.
So if he was going to go walk up and knock on a door and ask someone if he could cut their yard, you could say, instead of saying, hey, would you like me to cut your yard? You could say, hey, would you like me to make your yard look great? Like that's a little bit along the lines of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you want to come home to a yard that looks great and you get to go play with your son? Would that be valuable for you? That's the angle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that selling the solution over the product, I think that's so important. I remember years ago we were talking through that too. It's like no one wants a 12 by 20 workshop. You know what I mean? They want a shed that they can have a workbench in, and that the wall is high enough and that's big enough for their stuff, and they want to do some woodwork in there. Say, well, that's what they want. They don't want a 12 by 20, what we called a workshop at the time. Selling the solution, not the product, for sure.
Yeah, nobody's buying drill bits. They're buying holes.
Mm-hmm.
Drill bit just gives it to you.
Yeah. Yep. What are you you learned any big life lessons in the last few years?
I'm learning a lot now about myself.
Oh, yeah? How old are you?
I'm 36.
Oh, okay. 35.
36, yeah. So December I'll be 37.
Okay. You definitely have less hair on your face than I do right now.
Yeah.
What are you learning about yourself?
That I used to get a lot of energy in my 20s being around people. And so like there's this, this extrovert introvert spectrum. When I was tired, I wanted to go out and see people and socialize. I don't want to be around people as much. I love people. I love this. Like this is fun. This is energizing for me, but it actually taxes me more now, and I need to retreat. And so this quarantine has been good in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Yeah. What's interesting so I wrote the book mostly in a tree stand through the months of October and November.
On a laptop or an iPad or what?
iPad mini, of all things.
Really? But with a keyboard, I sure hope.
No, literally like thumbing the book.
Oh my goodness.
I spent most Thursdays and Fridays in the whitetail woods. Drop Foster off at school at 8 o'clock in the morning, go get in the tree stand till 1, 2 o'clock and thumb it.
Whoa. Interesting.
And it felt like one of the more productive seasons of my life. I don't have like no monetary gain to show from it other than the fact that I synthesize the way I think about building and leading sales teams. All that to say, that's carried into this quarantine, and I find myself needing me time more than I ever have.
I actually agree. I feel like I need a little bit more me time than I used to as well. But I also feel like my wife is tracking the other direction.
So same thing's happening.
She needs more community. I'm like, oh, what's going on here?
My wife and I are in that same season where she's thriving more and more on being around other people.
Yeah.
And I'm just not into it so much.
Yeah. I think for her, part of it might be the kids. She's at home all day with the kids, and then, I'm around more adults, I guess, throughout the day than she is. And so come evening time or weekends, she's looking to be around people, and I'm basically not, so. What was it about are you an avid hunter? Do you just love the outdoors? Or it sounds like that being in the tree stand, writing this book was actually a great experience for you.
I am an avid hunter. I'm a new hunter. I found bow hunting a few years ago. I've always been into the outdoors. I grew up whitewater kayaking and learned to surf in high school. So that's what drew. I really wanted to move somewhere where I could surf. That's why I went to Florida. California seemed too far away, so I lived on the beach in Florida for a few years.
Oh, cool.
But even in my days of being a practicing sales leader, I worked for a company in Southern California, and then I worked for a company in Nashville that owned treatment centers up and down the California coast. So I got a lot of surfing in.
Oh, wow.
And I largely got to surf on someone else's dime to get me there. I was going there for work, and then I'd stay. That was gone, and I had to fill it with a void. And to me, bow hunting filled that void because it's really hard.
Yeah, it is. But I was an avid hunter, man, from age 12 to, 25, 20 really, because then it started to drop after marriage and kids. But bow was my all-time favorite. The time of year, you're closer to the game. You're not hearing these guns pop off. Oh, I just love, man. I feel like you saw more game too, bow hunting, as opposed to rifle. I do miss bow hunting when I think about it, but I don't think about it that often. I haven't hunted in probably 10 years.
I think for me, bow hunting is not about killing animals. It's about being outside and seeing animals.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, I think that's why I didn't really appreciate hunting. I was like, man, that's not fun. Killing an animal, that's not.
Yeah.
But I enjoy seeing the game, and I'll let a lot of deer just walk.
Oh yeah.
But it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I just like being outside.
Yeah. Well, man, what I've heard about Kentucky is you've got some pretty killer deer up there.
Big deer.
You got some big deer on your farm?
Oh yeah.
Nice. Have you shot a big one yet?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How big?
Well, I mean, 152-inch, 10-point buck.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Beautiful. You have to put that picture in the show notes or something, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'd love to see that.
Big buck, yeah.
Hey, before I forget, where can people buy this book?
You can get it anywhere books are sold.
Okay.
If
I know it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
Yep.
It's in iTunes. But if you go to therevenueharvest.com, you'll get it for $10 cheaper than anywhere else.
Oh, okay.
And
cool.
I sign every copy that's bought on therevenueharvest.com.
Yes. Speaking of that, I couldn't quite read your writing here. What are you saying? What are you saying?
I said, here's to building bigger barns.
Okay, got it. The building one, I couldn't. I get it now. Makes sense. Love it. Final or parting thought or word of wisdom for the listeners before we wrap this up?
Everything's going to be okay. I think that, I study what we would call disruptive economic events. And we're certainly in one. My parents would say this is signs of the end times,
Yeah.
And then their generation before had that. It's certainly a crazy time. But I think that we owe it to ourselves to zoom out, change our perspective, understand different contexts, and listen and recognize that we're just a very small piece to a really large puzzle, and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. I love it, man. That's a great word. All right, Nigel. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Dude, I
really
loved it.
appreciate it, man. Thank you.